Good afternoon, and thanks for being here. We do this once a week, and next week will be our last Lenten meditation before we get into Holy Week, so time really passes. Today, that's a little too loud for me. There you go. How's that? Is that all right? This is the reading. Just so you know, I follow the Book of Common Prayer for my morning devotions, and there are readings that are suggested with it every day, so that in the Book of Common Prayer, what's called the daily office, there is a morning, noon, mid-afternoon, or late afternoon, and then finally an evening devotion. And there are different prayers. Every morning I use the same prayer here because that's the morning prayer. And then it goes from there into suggested readings. So the idea would be, of course, that we read the gospel lesson in our Lenten studies, and that's sort of the method I've been using. And this was the lesson for today. If you heard devotions, this is going to be familiar to you. And this is from John's Gospel. As he went along, he saw a man, blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Now that was a common assumption. If you contracted leprosy, it was because you had sinned, or your parents had sinned. And there are still some people today who believe that. Well, you have diabetes because you're a sinner, or your mother was a sinner. No, actually, my mother was a diabetic. Okay, period. I won't get into whatever sin she may or may not have committed, but anyway. So Jesus answers that. "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Now, after saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. "Go," he said, "wash in the pond of Siloam," and that word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked him, "Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" Some claimed that he was. Others said, "No, he only looks like him." But he himself said, "I'm this man." "How then were your eyes opened?" they asked. He replied, "The man they call Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see." "Where is this man?" they asked him. "I don't know," he said. They brought him to the Pharisees, the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees who asked him how he had received his sight. "He put mud on my eyes," the man replied for the third time, "and I washed them, and now I can see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others ask, "How can a sinner perform such signs?" So they were divided. Now understand, part of the argument is he had been healing on the Sabbath. He was doing work. Imagine mixing a little mud with spit and dirt to make mud. That was considered work. Okay. And then the others say, well, how could he possibly have done this? He's a sinner. Now, as you notice, there is not a single word of joy or celebration that the man is now able to see. No one stops and goes, wow, that's a miracle. They immediately get caught up into issues of the law, what they think should or shouldn't happen on the Sabbath day. Then they turned again to the blind man, blame the victim. What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened. Do you get that? What? How come you can see? It was your eyes he opened. Explain him. And he's thinking, man, I'm seeing trees for the first time. Give me a break. The man said simply, he is a prophet. They still did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. Now, do you understand how farcical this is? Now let's go get mom and dad, bring them into this controversy and say, is this your son? And they knew he was. He'd been there his whole life. Is this the one you say was born blind? Notice, was this the one you say was born blind? How is it that he now can see? As if they would know. So do you see the farce in all of this? We know he is our son, the parents answered, and we know he was born blind. But how he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Give us a break. Ask him. He's of age. He's grown up. He can speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders, who already had decided that anyone acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. So what are the elements that we've seen so far? Doubt. Accusation that Jesus wasn't keeping the Sabbath, accusations that he was stepping outside the law. There is recrimination, there is shame. In other words, what they're saying is, by all rights, your son should still be blind. What a neighborhood. A second time, now this poor guy, they summoned the man who had been blind. Give glory to God by telling the truth, they said, as if you wouldn't. We know this man is a sinner. He replied, whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. And then they asked him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? I mean, it was like he snuck back into a telephone booth and had done this magical thing. No, he did it right out in the open. The pool of Siloam was a public facility. He answered, I have told you for the umpteenth time, like I told all the other officers and investigators, and you did not listen. Uh-oh. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciple too? Ooh, now he's pushing back. And then they hurled insults at him, of course. You are this fellow's disciples. You are disciples of Moses. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. Oh, sure you do. Everybody knows he's from Nazareth in Galilee. Sorry, I just see this as kind of funny. The man answered, now that's remarkable. You see, oh, sorry. You don't know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to this godly person who does his will. Isn't it obvious to you that this man is blessed by God, or he wouldn't be healing people? Where's your faith? Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. To this they replied, "You were steeped in sin at birth. Nanny, nanny, doo-doo. How dare you lecture us?" All the self-righteousness just drips off the pages. Don't step in it. It's hard to get out. And they threw him out. Get out of here. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" "Who is he, sir?" the man asked. "Tell me, so that I may believe in him." And Jesus said, "You have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking to you." And the man said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshipped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind." Well, some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, "What? Are we blind too?" "Well, yes, sir, as a matter of fact, you are." That's the story. And Jesus said, "If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains." Now, as I said, I find a lot of humor in this banter. The lack of logic on the part of the religious leaders of Jesus' day is really kind of amazing, isn't it? The hypocrisy is incredible. And yet, they truly believed that they were the righteous ones, that they could see perfectly clearly what God wanted of them, and it was not healing sick people on the Sabbath. Don't do that. Now, of course, this is a controversy that plays throughout the Gospels between Jesus and the Pharisees and religious leaders. They got mad at him one time because he picked some corn, or allowed his disciples to pick some corn because they were hungry. It's not that hard. It's about the humanity of this poor guy who's been blind his whole life. And then what doesn't take 5 minutes out of Jesus' day, be it on the Sabbath, he helps the man be able to see again. He heals him. So let's take just a minute. And it's so easy to make fun of these Pharisees and religious leaders, these self-righteous preachers. And let's step into our own self for just a minute and ask, what are the things that we throw up as barriers, as walls, as objections to the grace that God gives to other people? What gets in the way of our freely celebrating the joy, the healing, the hope that God gives to this poor blind man, or to anyone whose lives are crippled or blind or broken or poor? Over the span of my ministry, I have often been involved in working with the poor. At one time or another, my wife and I created hygiene pantry in Toledo, Ohio. 32% of our neighbors live below the poverty level. She created the one that's now in Wichita that you might read about, the head-to-toe hygiene pantry. She doesn't work with it anymore, but she organized it. And we've done other things for poor people. And every single time, no matter the setting, Toledo, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Tulsa, Oklahoma, every single place I have been in ministry, somebody comes up and says, don't you think those people are taking advantage of your generosity? Because look at, they're driving cars, or they have phones. I say, I'm sure that these people come to our hygiene pantry and take the 4 rolls of toilet paper that we give them for 2 weeks and sell it for drugs. I'm sure of that. That's crazy. I have learned that people who live desperate lives, as this man did, and many others I have known, they spend their whole day trying to figure out how to live, how to be fed, sometimes how to get health care. And it is always the righteous ones who object, find out a reason why they shouldn't be receiving food or hygiene items. That's what we do. And so if Lent is meant to call us to examine ourselves, I'm asking you, what objections is it that we throw in the way of God's grace? Now, I'm not going to take testimonials, obviously, but that's an important question. Because if we cannot see through our own blindness, we are not likely to receive back the grace of God. Or to put it another way, we won't see the Messiah. Now, those are hard words. Lent is a time of hard words. So I'd like for us to take just a few moments to meditate quietly, to ask those kinds of questions. Put yourself in that story and ask and pray, God, if there's a part of me that gets in the way, for whatever reason, of your giving grace to another human being, forgive me. Now, I have some friends here in the chapel. Does anybody have a question they want to ask about this story? Well, I pray that you all go in the peace of Christ and know his love. Amen.